What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about top 5 summertime post-spawn baits. So let's get into it. Alright, guys, I'm not going to really be going in order today. I'm just going to be talking about the top 5, for me at least, that I catch the most fish on in the summertime, post-spawn. For you, if you're up north, post-spawn could be June, July, could be the start of it. If you're down here in Tennessee, post-spawn really started, April, right? And it's June right now. It's mid-June, early mid-June, and I'm going to be talking about some baits that I've been catching some fish on. So let's get into it. All right, guys. Like I said, these are not going to be in order at all. For me personally, I just have my top 5 baits laid out here, and I'm going to be going based off which one is closer to me physically. So number 1 is actually one of my top post-spawn baits. Oh, I dropped it. That's a swing head, right? So a swing head is, you can think of this multiple different ways. It's a very versatile bottom bait, right? So the main way is basically dragging it. This is the thing that most people think of when you think of a swing head, is dragging it. It's a supernatural way to drag a craw or creature style bait, because you're dragging this football head. Y'all are on a wiggly table, so it might be kind of wiggly, but you're dragging this bait on a football style head, and that EWG is free swinging. And so that bait is going to be supernatural for some of these schools offshore that might be pressured, or you have already caught a couple fish out of that school and you're trying to pick off more fish out of that school. This is a very good technique when you're trying to clean up a school offshore by dragging it. Another way that maybe not a lot of people think of is this is your crankbait, okay? So what I've heard a couple people do, I am just trying this out, so don't take my word for it personally. I know that Tactical Bassin has said some stuff about this technique, about cranking your swing heads. So you let that bait fall to the bottom. It's a bottom bait, right? Let that bait fall to the bottom, and then you literally reel it back in, but you want that football head to be ticking that bottom. And at the end of the day, if you're catching fish on that bait and you are really actually doing good cranking on the bottom, that football head should not be black anymore. That football head should not have paint on it, because you should be cranking that thing on the rocks. You might have to retie a little bit, because, that line tie, you might want to retie that every 30 minutes, right? If you don't want to lose fish. But, yeah, that's a technique that you can think about, that I'm personally trying out. Maybe you've been catching fish on this since you were 2 years old and you've been doing this for your entire life. But let's talk about plastics, right? So a couple plastics that I really like for the swing head, I really like creature bait or craw plastics. One of my favorites here, that is the X-Zone Lures Adrenaline Craw. And one of the reasons why I really like this creature bait, this craw, for this technique, is because these claws are actually built to float in the water. So if you ever decide to pause this, or if you ever decide to drag it, you're dragging this bait, those claws are going to be up in the air, in that fish's face, getting that picky fish in the summertime, that post-spawn fish, to bite. Another one of my favorite baits to throw on the swing head is actually the Crush City, the Rapala Crush City Bronco Bug. The Bronco Bug, super high density, kind of the high salt density plastic, kind of the opposite of this. Super salty. That Bronco Bug is kicking, right? Actually, I have some Bronco bugs right over there. I'm going to go grab a Bronco bug real quick, so bear with me. Alright, sorry about that, but here are some Crush City Rapala Bronco bugs, and they're inspired by a couple different JDM plastics, but they're really great for a flipping bait, but they're also really good for dragging offshore, maybe on a football jig, maybe on that swing head. And those craws, those legs are kicking that whole time, looking like a crawfish offshore. Right? And so that is my 5th bait for post-spawn summertime bass. Alright guys, my next bait, gonna keep this one short because that's gonna be a worm. Alright? This right here is the 6-inch deception worm by X-Zone Lures. And this is a really versatile straight tail worm, right? So this is not really a color I use a lot. I just have this color. For example, I really like a darker pink color or more like a bluegill color, depending on the implication. This shad color can be very good when I'm throwing this thing on a Nico rig. That's basically, I'm not going to rig up a Nico rig, this thing on a Nico rig right now. It's kind of like a wacky, if you don't know what a Nico rig is. It's basically, you're wacky rigging this, but you're wacky rigging it closer to the nose of that bait and further from the tail ever so slightly. And then you're shoving a nail weight up in that and kind of making this deception worm stand up like that in the water and shake on the bottom, right? That can be a really great way to catch some summertime bass as a Nico rig. But another way that I really like to throw this bait is on a drop shot. The 6-inch deception worm is one of my favorite drop shot worms and Nico rig worms because of the fact that it is floating plastic. Floating plastic will get that deception worm to float in their face and suspend almost, and just you can get that bait to sit still, and those finicky post-spawn offshore bass will come and smoke it, right? As well as a Nico rig, right? That thing is floating like so on the bottom. And so those can be that's kind of a 2-in-1, 2 techniques in one bait. I'm still going to do 3 other techniques, but you know what I mean. So let's get into number 3. So number 3 I actually have rigged up on a couple rods. And if you have not been living under a rock for the past, couple months, if you've not been living under a rock, you know what I'm holding. You might not know the exact bait, but you know that this is an urchin. An urchin can be, as we all know, an amazing way to catch bass, right? This is the 9.9 millimeter Lone Star Disco color of the Hags prickly pear. This is one of my favorite baits for smallmouth. I really like the smaller size koikis, the smaller size urchins, whatever you call them. I like the smaller size when I'm targeting smallmouth. Whereas when I'm targeting largemouth, right, they have larger mouths. Oh my gosh, they have larger mouths. So that's when I really like to throw the larger size of urchin bait. I already did an entire urchin bait video. Go check that out. So I'm not going to talk about these too much. Forgive me for having this on a spinning rod right now. I'm trying out the larger size on a spinning rod, seeing if it actually is bad or not. I normally throw it on a 7-foot medium bait casting setup with 15-pound line. But right now, I have it on a spinning rod. Jika rig, my favorite way to throw the urchin. But, okay. You already know about that. If you don't, go watch my dang quickie video. Obviously, my quickie video is not the best compared to others. But, enough yapping about quickies. Let's get into one of my favorite baits. Not just post-spawn, obviously. This thing is good in the spawn. This thing is good in the pre-spawn. This thing is good in the fall. This thing is good in the summer. You already know who it is. Chatterbait. Alright, so this is the Evo, the original Evo, I think. Pretty sure. I just know it's not a jackhammer. I know it's not the OG. So, this is one of my favorite for imitating bluegill is this color. That's kind of a bronze blade. Kind of a chartreuse, black back chartreuse head. Some lighter belly skirts, some green middle skirt, and some green pumpkin mixed with like some purplish pinkish flake on the top. And then what I'm doing is I'm pairing this chatterbait with the Hog Farmer Baits 5.5 inch spunk shad. Maybe it's a 4.5 inch. I think it's a 5.5 inch spunk shad, I'm pretty sure. As you can see, it's moving. And I am not. This thing is basically the most lively chatterbait trailer you will ever get, right? It can't, like, I'm trying to be as still as possible, and it's still moving, right? All of these ribs just give the absolute most action of your chatterbait trailers. So these chatterbait trailers will give your chatterbait a hunting action as well, which means it'll kind of dart left and right, and that can turn on some darn bass, right? So let's talk about setup for chatterbait. I personally, my chatterbait rod, this is one of my go-to rods that I'm holding right now. This is kind of like my utility rod that I'm holding. Dang, bro, I'm just trying to get my chatterbait back, and it's tangling in my other rods. Alright, I'm sorry about that. So let's talk about this setup here. This is one of my utility setups. This is a Duckett Ghost 2 7.2 heavy. And you might be thinking, Jasper, you're throwing a 7.2 heavy on a chatterbait. And some people might agree with that. Some people maybe not. This thing, I don't particularly want to high stick my rod and break it, but this thing has the perfect action for a chatterbait for being, I can't quite show you, for being a 7.2 heavy. It has some parabolics to it, right? With this rod, they actually get it super well. I've thrown a chatterbait on like a 7.1 heavy that might be too stiff, and I lose fish. I remember earlier this spring, I think it was April, and I was throwing a bladed jig. It wasn't a chatterbait, it was a bladed jig. Sorry. It was a bladed jig, and not going to tell you because it's the juice. I'm just kidding. And I was losing fish. I was hooking them, I was fighting them, and I was losing them at the boat. I was like, surely it can't be me, right? I was throwing it on a stiffer rod. And then I was actually throwing it on my frog rod. Hint for next bait. Switched over to this setup. Started landing fish. So that it's really good to have a fast tip, but a parabolic bend. Not really a parabolic bend, but a slower tip. So you can really, that thing's shattering, and then it loads up. And you don't want a super sensitive rod when you are throwing moving baits like a chatterbait, because if you feel that bite too soon, you set the hook too soon, you're going to lose that fish 7 times out of 10, all right? So that's why I really like a rod that it can really load up and they can get that thing deep in their mouth and they're not coming off, right? 7, what? Such an old reel. 8, 8-to-1 gear ratio. Didn't even know this is an 8-to-1, personally. I thought it was a 7-to-5. I guess I just got my reels mixed up. Put the wrong reel on here. 15-pound red label. Or a Braze X, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a Braze X. Red label is a Braze X. Yeah, that's my chatterbait setup. Sorry for literally yapping for 5 minutes about chatterbaits. I know people yap about chatterbaits for a lot longer than 5 minutes. Tactical bassing. Let's get into numero cinco. Literally, if you want to like go out, catch fish, and have the most fun of your life, right? Probably not the most fun of your life, but the most fun possible catching fish, catching bass. This guy, this dude right here. This is my favorite frog, probably. This is the spray bronze eye frog. You can barely see that bronze eye on him because let's see if we can showcase some teeth marks, right? Like this specific frog has gotten pretty beat up by some bass. So you know it works. This is one of my favorite colors to throw in the spray bronze eye frog. Out of 50, literally 50 plus colors. Who needs 50 plus colors in a frog? Me. And everybody else. But this is one of my favorites. Green back. I prefer with frogs. The only thing is I might actually personally paint the back of this frog pink. And that's what some people do with glide baits, and what I like a bright colored back on my frog so I can see my frog really well. If I'm bombing it out 100 plus feet and I might not see my frog, sometimes they just slurp it in and you don't see until it's too late, right? And so that's why this natural back can be good in some places, but I really like a more bright back. But otherwise, this color is one of my favorites because it's everything. This, look, like, watch. It's a craw. A craw, they're not going to be looking for craws most on them. But it's a bluegill. It's a shad. It's a frog. Right? So it's anything that you want it to be. Because it has that shad dot, has those bluegill colors, and it's obviously has those legs. It's a frog. You might be saying, "Oh, Jasper, are you stupid? Why do you have, like, can you not see well? Why are they not equal?" A lot of people, including me, do that to I'll trim my frog legs down to get a better bite to hookup ratio. Sometimes we'll just grab the frog legs, and if we cut them down, they have a better chance of getting that hook. And then also it helps that frog walk back and forth how I want it to, okay? And then let's talk about setup. 65-pound string, 65-pound moss green braid. I love 65-pound. It's the only stuff I use for frogs. 65-pound string. Pretty sure this is 8-to-1 gear ratio. Lose. I'm pretty sure. Where's the actual thing? Yeah, 8-to-1 gear ratio. Lose. Sorry. This is a 7-1 heavy rod. The 7-1 heavy is I honestly prefer a 7.2. I used to use that white rod that you saw earlier for frogs, but I really like this because look at that rod bend. It doesn't have too much. It has some parabolics to it, but it's a faster tip, right? And so you can really set that hook, and then having a backbone to really rip that fish out of the thickness that you are throwing your frogs in. So let me know if y'all enjoyed that video. Let me know if you maybe learned something, maybe you didn't learn something. I don't really care. I want you to learn stuff, but if you didn't, that's alright. I guess subscribe if you really want to. If you're in Nashville, Harbor 3 Outfitters, only place to buy tackle. Alright, that's it.